your name, the mountains shake and crumble at your name. The oceans roar and tumble at your name. Angels will bow, the earth will rejoice, your people cry out. Lord of all the earth, we shout your name, filling up the skies with endless praise, endless praise. Yahweh, Yahweh, we love to shout your name, oh Lord. And your name, the morning breaks to glory. At your name, creation sings a story. At your name, angels will bow, the earth will rejoice, your people cry out. Lord of all the earth, we shout your name, filling up the skies with endless praise, endless praise. Yahweh, Yahweh, we love to shout your name, oh Lord. There is no one like our God, we will praise you, praise you. There's no one like our God, we will sing, we will sing. There is no one like our God, we will praise you, praise you. Jesus is our God, we will sing. All the earth, we shout your name, filling up the skies with endless praise, endless praise. Yahweh, Yahweh, we love to shout your name, oh Lord. Lord of all the earth, we shout your name, filling up the skies with endless praise, endless praise. Yahweh, Yahweh, we love to shout your name, oh Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah. You are worthy to be praised, Lord. We just look to the skies for you, Jesus. Praise you, Jesus. If faith can move the mountains, let the mountains move. We come with expectation, waiting here for you. Waiting here for you. You're the Lord of all creation, and still you know my heart. The with our hands lifted high in praise. And it's you we adore, singing hallelujah, singing hallelujah. You are worthy to be praised, Lord. Thank you, Father. Your love has ravished my heart and taken me over, taken me over. And all I want is to be with you forever, with you forever. So pull me a little closer, take me a little deeper. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your heart. 'Cause your love is so much sweeter than anything I've tasted. I wanna know your heart, I wanna know your my heart and taken me over, taken me over. And all I want is to be with you forever, with you forever. I today to draw closer to you. You are so amazing, Lord. You're just so beautiful. Oh, bless you, Jesus. You dance over me while I am unaware. You sing all around, but I never hear the sound. Lord, I'm amazed by you. Lord, I'm amazed by you. Lord, I'm amazed by you. How you love me. Jesus, you paint. You paint the morning sky with miracles in mind. My hope will always stand. Jesus, you hold me in your hands. Lord, I'm amazed by you. Lord, I'm amazed by you. Lord, I'm amazed by you. How you love me. Is your love for me? How wide, how deep, how great is your love for me, Jesus. Lord, I'm amazed by you. Lord, I'm amazed.
One of the things that we like to do is to build bridges into the community. And so we've been here for 50 years. This church has been around for over 50 years. And it's really fun when you find another church that is doing a significant project to impact our culture. And so this past year, the elders said we would like to be involved in a particular project. And I'll let Len explain about it in just a minute. But we put some finances toward it, and then we said we'd like to have a team go and actually help you do this. So can you explain what we just did yesterday?
I can. Yesterday we had a great day before the football games, and some of us even had a great day after the football games, and some didn't, and I'm sorry for which side of that game you're on. But yesterday we had the Rutland Meals Challenge, which is an annual event. How many of you have heard of the Rutland Meals Challenge? Okay. Not a whole lot. It's held at the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, and that church hosts this every year where they set up this process to take bulk food, which they collect funds for throughout the year, and then they buy bulk food, and it's rice and beans and macaroni and cheese and vitamins and things, and they pack it all into bags, and then they pack it into boxes, and then they distribute it throughout the community to the local food banks, such as Fairhaven, West Rutland, and Rutland. Doesn't leave the community. The food all stays here. I don't know how many years they've been doing this, but we caught on to it last year. That was our first year to go. And as Pastor Dave said, this year at the budget committee, we said, hey, we'd like to support that event because it supports our local people and helps with the hungry and the homeless. And there's a lot of those out there that need those kind of meals. So they're packaged in packages that feed 6 people, and then they're put into a box. We had 13 people there yesterday, Team CBC. We sent some pictures to Jen. She'll probably get them out on Facebook or something this week. So you can kind of see who was there and what we did. We packed 10,000 meals in less than an hour. That's a lot of people that get to be fed. Now there was about 30 other people, so it wasn't just us, but I would say probably we packed 4,000 to 5,000 of those 10,000 meals just at our table. We had a table, it was really going, we were smoking. When we finished, there was rice and macaroni all over the place. A lot of it didn't get into bags, some bags didn't get sealed, and we passed them along and stuff. We didn't waste anything though. So we packed a lot of food yesterday. The goal was 50,000 meals for people in the local area. Now this is local mission work, folks. This is something you can do. You don't have to go anywhere. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs you about an hour and a half of your time, and what a good feeling to know that you've done something for the local community. So I would just say there's opportunities to serve in our local area in missions, and we all are commanded to be part of that, and I would encourage you to do that. It'll come up again next year. It's not the only thing that's done in Rutland to serve the local people.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's all? I got more.
Not today. Okay. I'm really glad you're here today. Here's what we're going to do. We do different spiritual disciplines in our church. We talk about Bible reading, daily Bible reading. We talk about prayer. We talk about tithing. We talk about being involved in small groups. We talk about being engaged in service. And today, we're going to address the concept of prayer. For many of us growing up, prayer was something that our parents did. You know, like I'd see my mom and dad, they'd pray every morning, and I would go down and I'd sit on the stairwell looking down into the dining room, and I'd watch them do that, because all the kids were supposed to be there too, but I just didn't like doing it. It felt weird for me to do that. But I would always come down and sit on the stairs and watch them do it. Well, you know, now I'm a pastor now, and prayer is part of that spiritual discipline that is really powerful. It connects us with God, with each other. And how do you do that effectively? There's different ways to pray, but what I'm going to say is we have a yellow sheet like this, and we made it yellow so that you could find it. And I would like you to put it in your Bibles and keep it in your Bible so that when you pray, you have access to that if you want to. There's going to be a time in your life where you're going to say, oh, now, a pastor talked about that one time. Where is that? And so we made it yellow, and we've had these brochures on the back. Again, so if you didn't get a yellow form that looks like this, just raise your hand, and Peter will be happy to get you a copy. But I like even the teenagers to have one. So just raise your hand if you can get one. So on this particular chart is attributes of God, and then on the other side is called an ACTS method, acts. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk down through this, and this is part of the Nehemiah passage that we're studying. The prayer that Nehemiah prays is actually this format, and he just lays it right out, and it's like, this is so awesome. This is what he was doing thousands of years ago is he was praying an Acts prayer. And I want to just show you, this is a method, not the only method, but it is a method, and it's pretty significant. And if you're trying to find answers to prayers that you want to hear from God, I think this is a great method. So whether you're watching by TV or you're here, take good notes, and I think this will be helpful. So I have some great readers that have volunteered to read this morning. Could they come up, please? Okay. I'm really glad you're here today. Here's what we're going to do. We do different spiritual disciplines in our church. We talk about Bible reading, daily Bible reading. We talk about prayer. We talk about tithing. We talk about being involved in small groups. We talk about being engaged in service. And today, we're going to address the concept of prayer. For many of us growing up, prayer was something that our parents did. You know, like I'd see my mom and dad, they'd pray every morning, and I would go down and I'd sit on the stairwell looking down into the dining room, and I'd watch them do that because all the kids were supposed to be there too, but I just didn't like doing it. It felt weird for me to do that. But I would always come down and sit on the stairs and watch them do it. Well, you know, now I'm a pastor now, and prayer is part of that spiritual discipline that is really powerful. It connects us with God, with each other. And how do you do that effectively? There's different ways to pray, but what I'm going to say is we have a yellow sheet like this, and we made it yellow so that you could find it. And I would like you to put it in your Bibles and keep it in your Bible so that when you pray, you have access to that if you want to. There's going to be a time in your life where you're going to say, oh, no, Pastor talked about that one time. Where is that? And so we made it yellow, and we've had these brochures on the back. Again, so if you didn't get a yellow form that looks like this, just raise your hand, and Peter will be happy to get you a copy. But I like even the teenagers to have one. So just raise your hand if you can get one. So on this particular chart is attributes of God, and then on the other side is called an ACTS method, acts. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk down through this, and this is part of the Nehemiah passage that we're studying. The prayer that Nehemiah prays is actually this format. And he just lays it right out, and it's like, this is so awesome. This is what he was doing thousands of years ago is he was praying an Acts prayer. And I want to just show you this is a method, not the only method, but it is a method, and it's pretty significant. And if you're trying to find answers to prayers that you want to hear from God, I think this is a great method. So whether you're watching by TV or you're here, take good notes, and I think this will be helpful. So I have some great readers that have volunteered to read this morning. Could they come up, please? So we have Kelsey and Mark, and then we have Renee and Lynn. And what they're going to do is they're going to read the section on your paper there that is called Attributes of God. And what I want you to think through as we're going through, there's two groups of attributes of God. The first one is ways that no one can be like God. And here's what it says on our paper. The Bible describes God with a variety of pictures, symbols, and words. Taken together, a consistent full character picture emerges. Theologians refer to the term attributes when enumerating the characteristics of God. Below is one list which explains in simple terms those attributes and their meaning. So they're going to say a word, this is who God is, this is his character, and then we can't be like him, but when you think about this particular thing, it's like, this is pretty awesome, and it's big, and it's bigger than us. So I want you to follow down through here and listen as they read.
God is omnipresent. He is always near. No place is farther from him than any other place. He is not limited to any spatial dimensions.
God is omnipotent. He can do anything that does not violate his nature. He is all-powerful. Nothing is impossible for him. His power is unlimited and unrestricted, except by his own choice.
God is omniscient. He knows everything. Nothing is hidden. Nothing goes unnoticed. No situation is beyond his ability to grasp. All mysteries are clear to him. No one can tell him something he does not already know.
God is sovereign. He is the ultimate ruler of the universe. No one is greater in authority or power than he. No sin or disobedience can thwart the purposes he desires to bring to pass.
God is eternal. He always has been. He always will be. He had no beginning. He will have no end. He is the creator of time. He is not subject to time, but rules over it.
God is immutable. He does not change. He is not getting better. His attributes can't be diminished. He does not grow or increase. He is perfect the way he is, and we can rest assured that he will continue that way.
God is infinite. He is unlimited. Whatever he is, He is that to an infinite degree. You cannot measure any part of him or his attributes. He is inexhaustible in every aspect of his being.
And these are ways that we can imitate God. Go ahead.
God is holy. He is pure. He is without fault. He cannot be compared to anyone or anything because he is so different from all we've ever known or experienced.
God is wise. He uses his knowledge skillfully. He makes sense. He is no fool. His counsel can be trusted.
God is good. He has no evil, can do no evil. He works for the benefit of his creatures. He can be trusted with our well-being.
God is just. He is fair. He does not tolerate unrighteousness. He will make sure every wrong will be made right. He is impartial.
God is love. Sacrifice is in his very nature. He cares, he gives, he serves. He works to bring out what we need. He is compassionate, he is sensitive. He chooses to let us matter to him.
Okay, thank you. Now that's the kind of God that I want to serve. Those are awesome concepts. So now take your Bibles, please, and turn to Nehemiah chapter 1. Over the years, I've seen and purchased actually books on prayer. And one of the titles I remember, Prayer is Just Asking God. And the more I think about it, the more that kind of grates on me. Think of your relationship with your mom or dad. If the only thing you did with them is go and ask them for something, how would your relationship be? You know, you haven't seen them for all day and you rush right in and you just start asking them for stuff. Frankly, I think that's offensive, if that's all you do. I think you should come in and spend a little time there and say, you know what, I really appreciate who you are and what you've done for me. And say a few things about how they're wonderful people and your relationship with them and what it means, what they have done and who they are, how that has impacted you. That's called adoration. And then confession, if there's things that between you and your mom and dad say, for instance, you need to get them right. Or they're going to say, yes, I hear this is what you want, but what about this over here? You got to deal with that. That's called confession. And then thanksgiving, to say thank you in the midst of all the things that are going on. And that you zero in, you say, you know, I realize how you have provided for me and what you've done. And then you can ask your request. So that's kind of the ACTS method that we're going to talk about this morning. And I want to show you in Nehemiah chapter 1 that this is how Nehemiah prays. Nehemiah was taken captive from Israel, and he was brought over to Babylon, and he was in the king's court. He was a high official, had access to the king, the enemy king, and he was there. And so he was kind of like a influencer, and he had direct access to the king. But he had heard last week, or 2 weeks ago when we studied this, and he had heard that his homeland back in Jerusalem, that everything was a disaster. The city basically was burned, the gates were destroyed, the people who were there had no defense, and it was just a sad situation. And so he started mourning for that when he heard how his homeland was. And then he decided to pray before God. And so he had been fasting and praying. And then verse 5, here's how it starts. It starts with the A, the adoration part of this. Then I said, O Lord of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and obey his commands. Let your ears be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant is praying before you this day for your servants, the people of Israel. Now, one of the phrases I really like there, he says, let your eyes be open to what? What does he say? To see? To hear. Let your eyes be open to hear. I think that's really interesting. In other words, he wants God not only to see things, that's obvious, God can see it, but he says, I want you to hear the heart of the people. I want you to hear my heart. I want you to observe my behavior and hear what I'm saying. And so he says that in those specific terms. Notice what he says. He calls right to the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love. And so he goes right to who God is in his bigness, realizing he's got a situation that's tough, and he says, I need a big God to handle this situation. You ever have that in your life? Where your situation is pretty dire. You don't need a small God. You need a big God on this one. And that's what he was praying. He was praying for a big God. Adoration is to worship and to honor our great and awesome God. He started there. And here's what I think. This is why I think this list is so important for you to have in your Bibles. Why I say put it in your Bibles is because hopefully you use your Bibles and you think, where is the list about God's attributes? You can find it in your Bible. You could put it in your wallet, I suppose, but probably a little bulky for that. So turn over to the list of attributes. And I want to show you how those attributes are bigger than your problem. And what I would say is, if you got a situation that is you're struggling with or you're trying to find answers with, is go and you tell God first, here's who you are, God, and I'm trusting in you on this one. For instance, if you're lonely and feel isolated that no one understands, wouldn't you want it to have a God who's omnipresent, who's there wherever you go? He's there. You are never alone as a Christian. If you're in a situation where you just have other people who are controlling and you feel powerless, you just feel like there's no way of me have power. Wouldn't you want a God who's omnipotent, who's all-powerful himself? We go down to someone's in control of your life, or you feel like you just can't get out of your setting. It could be your finances are just overwhelming you, or sickness, and you feel like I have no control. Then you go and you talk about a God who's sovereign. And say, you know what, God? You're bigger than me, and I trust you because you're sovereign. Because you're sovereign, I don't have to be. And I'm okay with that. And so you just give whatever that problem is to God, and you say, here you go, God. I don't want it anymore. And I give it to you. I'll let you be sovereign. You pull the decision, and I'll trust you and thank you either way. Maybe you're worrying, or you've had past mistakes that just kind of haunt you. It's like a backpack that comes along on your back, and it's always there. What about a God who is eternal, who is with you when those mistakes happen? Whether it was done on you or at you or you chose it. God was still there. You didn't take him by surprise. Or life is changing faster than you want. Or changes are happening, and those are the changes that you wouldn't have chosen. How about a God who's unchangeable? You can depend on him. He will not change. If he was good back then, he's still good now. Being powerless and having an infinite God. And then you go over to the other things where God is holy. You have choices to make. You can always be assured that the holy choice is the right choice because that's who God is. The Bible says, be ye therefore holy because your Father in heaven is holy. You have a decision to make. You want to know what's next? How about a God who's wise? Not only does he have knowledge, but he's wise with it. And you can go and ask him. He's good. He's just and righteous when things seem unfair. That's one I go to periodically. It's like, okay, this just is not fair. This is not working out the way I want it to do. It's not logical, rational. But I have to trust that God is just. And he is the one who will be the judge. And then ultimately, he's loving. So I think this is a great list, and I believe, quite frankly, that if you would go to God in prayer and adore him and say, here's who you are, God. Here's my situation. We'll talk about it in a minute, but before I get started, I just want to reaffirm, here's who you are, and I'm trusting in this. And you know what happens to your problems a lot of times? When you start with who God is, your problems that were so monumental and so like monsters in the dark, kind of like the monsters under the bed concept, they shrink. And all of a sudden, it's like, God, you're pretty awesome. And I'm good with that. For instance, let me just look at some of the texts here that are very good. Turn to 1 Timothy. Keep your hand here in Nehemiah because we're coming back. But in 1 Timothy, I want to read a section. Paul is writing to a young pastor. And Timothy had his hands full, I think. And Paul was writing to him as kind of as a father figure, and he had been discipling Timothy and being a pastor. And Paul reminds Timothy of his background. He's saying, Timothy, just kind of heads up so you know who I am. And what happened in my life is I wasn't a very good person at all. And in the middle of me not being a very good person, by the way, God stepped in and he chose me. If he would choose me in my badness, just think how he can use you. And so here's what he says. This is Paul mentions 3 times in the scriptures his view of himself. And I want you to watch what happens after he says who he is. What happens to his heart. So 1 Timothy 1:12. I thank Christ Jesus our Lord, who has given me strength, that he considered me faithful, appointing me to his service. Even though I was once a blasphemer and a persecutor and a violent man, he put people in prison and had people killed because they were Christians. I mean, he would persecuted the church when it got going. He was a bad dude, actually. So he did all that. He was a violent man. I was shown mercy because I acted in ignorance and unbelief. The grace of our Lord is poured out upon me, how much? Abundantly, along with the faith and love that are in Christ Jesus. So he just said who he is. Here is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the worst. You know, most people don't talk about how worse they are. They talk about how good they are and how much gooder they are than everybody else. I know that's not a word, but it just sounds good, you know. So, if you have a line and you ask people how good they are, and you have a bell curve, where do almost everybody say they are on this bell curve? Where? They're in the middle, and on which side of the middle? Yeah, there you go. Just over the bad part. They're over here. They're on the good side. So the bulk of people are the bad people, and they're better than the bad people. That's how we see ourselves. And if you ask Paul will say, I'm on the end. I'm the worst. But God. You have to catch that. And Paul doesn't stay where he was, how bad he was, because he starts, watch what he does. It's so awesome. Okay, of whom I'm the worst. Verse 16. But for this reason I was shown mercy, so that in me, the worst of sinners, Christ Jesus might display his unlimited patience as an example for those who would believe on him and receive eternal life. Now to the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. He starts talking about how he is and who he really is. He understands himself. You see, this is really interesting because the closer Paul got to God, the more he saw his sinfulness as it was. The more he saw that. But when he saw that, it instantly triggered because he admitted it. He didn't try to cover it up. He said, I'm the worst. But God, and then he starts praising God and he says, thank you for being the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God. And all of a sudden his voice just opens up in praise because of who God is, the great God. And what I'd love for each one of you and for those of you who are seriously seeking God is to understand that no matter where you've come from, what you've done, how bad it is, God's bigger than that. He's greater than that. And he cares for you. And he loves you. And he forgives. And you can be set free You don't have to be under the pile or under the circumstances or under anything, under the control of other people, because God is God. And so when you go into prayer time and you're wanting to talk to God, what I would say is that God, here's who you are. And I want to adore you and thank you for who you are. Start there in your prayers and see if your problems don't shrink. I think they will. Next, we talk about confession. So now I'll go back to Nehemiah here. So he just was adoring God. Then in the second half of verse 6, it says this: I confess the sins of Israel, including myself and my father's house, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, or laws that you gave your servant Moses. And so he's going back and he's saying, hey, God, I really love you, and here's who you are. However, we haven't kept the standard. And I want to admit we're wrong. Not only am I wrong, but the people around me are wrong. Boy, you know, when I talk with people, it's so hard to say, I admit. Why is it so hard to say? It's so easy to say, pass judgment on everybody else and how they're wrong. We end up in this gossip thing, which is not a good thing. But it's so easy to flow out of our mouth. And it's kind of like they're over here and we're here in that gossip thing. That's where gossip goes bad. But when you have understood who God was and He's just and fair and all those things, how can you utter out of your mouth a comparison of other people? What happens is in confession, I put it in your notes here, 2 Corinthians 10:12. If you read that verse, it says this: when we compare ourselves with ourselves, it's a foolish thing to do. My paraphrase. It's not wise. Don't compare yourselves to other people, because when we compare ourselves to other people, we usually we take our strength, what we're good at, and we compare it to other people's weaknesses. Well, of course we're going to be better than them then. Come on, that's not a fair thing. For instance, I'm pretty good at directions. In fact, my youngest son calls me a human GPS. I can just kind of sit in a vehicle and have I can feel where you got to go. I'm pretty good at it, actually. I do use a GPS to confirm what I know. But there are some people who are very poor at directions. And when they say, when you come to an intersection, you got 3 ways you can go, which way you go, and they say this way, I go, let's go this way. You know, it's just, now it's not fair for me to compare my excellence with theirs non-excellence. I know this is coming off cocky, and I don't really mean it to be this way. Okay, I think we should move on here. Okay, you get my point here. Be careful. Really watch your mouth, because the Bible says out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. And be very careful here. And so what Nehemiah is doing is saying, before I go too far, God, I have to confess some things that I'm not perfect in. I have done it wrong. And I admit I'm wrong. There's a time for that. In fact, the Bible says in Psalm 66:18, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. The Lord won't hear me if I got sin in my life. Same with you. Be very careful. Sin will block my relationship with God. And through forgiveness, I can be restored. Psalm 51 is a powerful story of King David, who had sinned against God when he committed adultery with Bathsheba and then killed her husband. It was very bad. And the prophet Nathan came and poked his finger at David, and David admitted, he says, I am wrong. And Psalm 51 is the cry of David's heart in the midst of that pain. And he says, restore unto me the joy of my salvation. And I admit, and my heart is heavy and it hurts. And he admitted before God that he was wrong. And he had sinned against God, not just against Bathsheba and her husband, but he had sinned against God is what he realized. And so this admission is really a very powerful thing, and there's a real place for it in our prayers. The third is on thanksgiving. Notice what Nehemiah does in verse 8. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, you are unfaithful. I will scatter you among the nations, but if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if you are exiled, your people to the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them back to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for your name. And what he's saying is our people have been scattered to the ends of the earth. But during this time frame, some 500 years BC, there were people that were starting to gather to come back to Israel. And it was an amazing thing because Israel was desolate. So Zerubbabel brought people back and they rebuilt the temple. Ezra came back and he rebuilt the people. And Nehemiah is going to come back, we're going to see in the next couple of weeks, and he's going to do a project of rebuilding the walls to protect the people. And so people start coming back, and how could this happen except God allows it to happen? And of course, in some of our worlds, the regathering of the people of Israel back to Israel today is part of this promise that he will gather his people back. And it's a phenomenal thing. So joy flows here from a joyful spirit. A gratitude attitude is there. If you read Philippians 4, verses 4 through 9, Paul is in prison. And he just starts talking here, and out of prison, and their prisons were not like our prisons, by the way. They were pretty rough places. And he says this is out of someone who's in prison. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And the word guard there has to do with the guard of, like the Roman guards. The peace of God will guard your heart and keep you safe. And then he says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think of such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard in me, put that into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. And so you just see this man who's so grateful. You ever been around a person who's grumpy and complaining and a person who's grateful and thankful? Which person would you rather be around? The grumpy person? Anybody? How about the thankful, grateful person? Anybody? Yeah, I think so. Why? Well, there's just something that attracts you to be around somebody who's grateful. And I think God wants to be around people like that too. Now, I'm not God, but if I was God, with the grumpy people, I'd say, stop it. Why are you so grumpy? What you need to do is relook at your life and see how maybe it's not as bad as you think. And all you got to do is be around some people who have some really tough problems. And you realize how grateful you really need to be. So I think we really need to turn it up in the grateful department in our prayers. In fact, there are times when Don and I will be walking, and we'll take a walk or do something in the car, or and we'll say, okay, no request today. We're not going to ask God for anything. We're just going to thank him. So we take turns back and forth, thanking God for who he is or what he's done, or what is going on in our life that we can be really grateful for. And you know what happened? What do you think happens at the end of that? Anybody? What do you think? How do you think we are at the end of prayer like that? Was just saying thank you. We're joyful. We're happy. We're content, abundant. We could talk about living in a land of abundance. Just saying, you might want to try that. God's blessings are often tied to our obedience. And if something's not working out, check your obedience. There's probably an issue there. There's a text that I have written here. It talks about remembering. In Deuteronomy 8:10-20, it talks about when you get into a land that's flowing with, that's great, remember, it's not you who brought you there, it's God. And God is the God of the increase, who will bring increase in your life. It's not you and your hard work, by the way. It's God rewards that. Finally, supplication is to humbly and earnestly ask. And I find this is interesting because at the end of this, after we've done adoration, confession, thanksgiving, then we're ready to ask requests. And some of those requests by that time in your prayers have already changed because they probably aren't so urgent. They aren't as big as they once were. You've already given it to God. You're grateful no matter what's going to happen. And all of a sudden now when you start telling God your request, it's different than when it would have been when you started. And I think there's some real value to this. So watch what Nehemiah did here. Verse 10. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. He was talking about the king. And so now he's praying. He says, I'm going to go meet the king. He says, I think I know what I need to do. Grant me success. He's praying for himself here. Can you imagine actually praying for yourself? That's what he did. Now, something I've underlined in this prayer, you notice a phrase that's mentioned again and again? Anybody? A phrase that's mentioned again and again? What's mentioned here? Your servant. Who said that? Okay, your servant is mentioned. How many times? How many times is your servant? Anytime phrases are re-mentioned, there's an emphasis there. How many times do you see? More? More than 4. Anybody else? More? I had 8. I had 7 for a while, and then I saw another one that was 8. So the point is what he's trying to say here is, I'm going to the God of the universe here, and I am a servant. Now, Nehemiah was a head honcho where he was in Susa, the capital. He was under the king. And yet he said, I'm your servant, God. Because when he compared himself to the God of the universe, he wasn't much. He said, I'm just a servant. God wants to do immeasurably more than we ask or think, according to his mighty power in us, Ephesians 3:14. So here's my prayer for you, is that you would ponder these and take these concepts and wrestle them through, because it's going to change how you do life. Now, right after class here, there are adult classes for you to go to, and I would highly recommend that you get engaged in one of those. We have men's class, a couples class over here. We have a mixed adult class over there. We have ladies class. And then my wife and I are going to go back out here in the cafe. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow up with what we've been talking about on 10 intentions for the new year. What are you going to do intentionally? And then what we're going to talk about is we have things that we feel, and it was a worksheet like this. And here are the right answers, by the way, on 10 intentions. But sometimes we have some of these things that we have, but we don't do them. And every time we write a list, we write this stuff down, and we don't do them. Why is it? Is we get stuck with them, and we don't know what to do with them, and we get frustrated. And what I'm saying is you've got to have a breakthrough on that issue or take it off the list. Don't keep writing it down. Putting it down and then saying, I'm going to have a breakthrough. I'm going to work this through so I will actually do this thing. If God is in this list and he wants me to be a stronger person, then let's deal with it. So today we're going to deal with that on having a breakthrough. And if you don't have a class you want to, we'd love to have you out here and join us. So let's close in our worship.
When the world is waiting, you cover us with your endless grace. Your love is relentless. Your love is relentless. Your love is relentless. Your love is relentless. The time is up for chasing shadows.